Hey, folks, how's it going? Welcome to Moment of Clarity. Thanks for joining me today. Internal government reports, in an internal government report showing that the U.S. is likely. I don't know if I want to use the word of likely, but it seems likely that the U.S. plans to move towards wrapping up the proxy war in Ukraine in order to focus more on war with China. Obviously, that's horrific in its own way. War with China is equally catastrophic to war with Russia because nuclear Armageddon, no one wins. Did I mention that? But this is coming from, and by the way, I should mention later in the show, I'll be playing a clip from the best show on in news media. If you want to learn nothing, if you want your brain actually more vacant after you leave from watching something than when you showed up, then turn on Meet the Press. I'm going to show a clip from that and break it down about the Tyree Nichols story, the more police brutality here in the United States of freedom, if you will. I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into how the Supreme Court is working to crush unions even more. Unions are currently 7% of the workforce, although that's been growing, right? Worker rights have been growing, worker power has been growing, and so they want to stop that. So the Supreme Court is on the cusp of basically destroying the ability to strike. Anyway, let's get to it. Shall we? Shall we get to it? Thanks for being here. Please make sure to click subscribe if you're on the YouTubes and click the bell icon next to the subscribe so that you actually hear when I'm going live. Also, please click follow if you're on the Rumbles, or join, or whatever the term is this week for the thing. I believe one of them you have to click press our bodies together. That's to join. When you have to click when two become one in order to no, don't do that. All right, here we go. So this is coming from the Rand Corporation, which is, many of you already know this, but you kind of have to stipulate that Rand is not just any regular corporation. This is a U.S. government think tank, essentially. I mean, they don't call it a think tank, but it puts out reports, and it's done this since World War II, puts out reports that our government generally follows, because the Rand is in many ways working with the Pentagon. They're kind of this separate corporate entity. And, Rand was the one that actually did the study, the famous Daniel Ellsberg leak of the Pentagon Papers, now considered one of the most important leaks the U.S. has ever seen, revealing the atrocities that went on in Vietnam, just how horrific it was. He was working for Rand at that time when he leaked that and had access to it. And Rand was doing that study of what actually went on in Vietnam. And so the other thing that Rand does is actually kind of speak the truth, because their audience is not the public. Their audience, they're not trying to speak to you or me. They only speak to a tiny cabal. And yes, I think that term fits right now. They only speak to a tiny cabal of ruling elite that they are doing this research for, that they are, that's why they were revealing the truths in Vietnam, because internally it doesn't help to lie to yourselves about what's going on. That's more external. That's propaganda. That's lying to the American people. Internally, they want to know the reality on the ground. So often, Rand will tell the truths that you won't get from your mainstream media. However, the Rand reports are not generally supposed to get out to the public. They're sometimes leaked. Sometimes they maybe you can get them through FOIAs, I guess. But no, I don't know. FOIAs are for technically government. So I don't know. Maybe it's not FOIAs, but not all their reports actually get to the public, and they're not meant for the public. But this one has gotten out, whether it was leak or some other scenario. But all right. And this is Popular Resistance is reprinting this. Ukraine, RAND study sees risks in prolonged war in Ukraine. That's prolonged proxy war. But don't worry, the references to China is coming up in a minute. But RAND Corp is government and industry financed large research industry. So in the title, I said U.S. government report. And some people may go, oh, it's not a U.S. government report. It's RAND Corp. Well, yeah, but RAND it's funded by our government. It's part of our government. I mean, just acting like they're just like fucking Amazon or some shit, which is also honestly has massive contracts with our government. Bad example. Well, you know what? Our government is part and parcel to corporate America, but this is even closer. This is even closer tied than general corporate America is our government because they own our government. But anyway, founded shortly after the end of the Second World War, it mostly works for the Pentagon by developing policies and strategies. And so first, this article goes through revealing how RAND successfully, before the proxy war in Ukraine began, called basically everything that was going to happen so far. And why did they call that? Because they're honestly stipulating it. They're telling our government largely what to do. They put out reports of how the U.S. should behave, and the U.S. government, the tiny cabal that runs shit, they generally take the advice of the RAND Corporation in terms of what's going to happen, what could happen. So in this earlier report, this is before the proxy war in Ukraine began, examines Russia's. This report examines Russia's economic, political, and military vulnerabilities and anxieties. It then analyzes potential policy options to exploit them. So, boy, isn't that fascinating? Because if you think about it, because this reveals a lot more than just the fact that the U.S. is pivoting to war with China. It reveals that because the story we're told as average Americans by our mainstream media, by our government, etc., is that we were just standing here. The U.S. government was just standing here, and oh my goodness, Russia invaded Ukraine, right? It all just popped off in February, and we were like, what the fuck, right? That's what they tell you. That's what they tell you went on. Bullshit. And this is another place you're seeing it's bullshit. I mean, I've gone through the whole history of Ukraine, 2014 Maidan coup, backed by the U.S., funding and arming Nazis. You can watch the video of John McCain and I believe Lindsey Graham or other politicians over there meeting with the Nazis in 2013 saying, we're going to give you all the support we need, all the support you need. Sorry. So that's interesting. If it just started in February, why was John McCain standing there in the middle of Nazis going, I'm with you, bud? Anyway, but here's yet again another example, another piece of proof showing that the U.S., it was not like, oh, February happened and Russia just invaded Ukraine. This is a high-level U.S. government report saying, here's what we need to do to Russia before February of last year, before a year ago. This is a report saying, here's how we can exploit Russia's economic, political, military vulnerabilities and anxieties. So why would they be doing that if we were just caught by surprise, right? That war in Ukraine is crazy. Yeah, well, Russia invaded Ukraine. No one knew that was going to happen, right? RAND developed policy options in those 4 fields. Policy options meaning policies for our ruling cabal to follow. It then evaluated their benefit, costs, and risks, as well as their likelihood of success. Now, they show some charts in here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is how it looks. So they hand, at the time it was Trump, but now it's Biden, a list of here's how to exploit Russia, how to fuck with Russia. One way would be to hinder their petroleum exports, and they give that as a high benefit, a low cost, and a likelihood of success is high. Well, boy, that sounds like a no-brainer. Let's just stop them from being able to export their gas. Then it says, down here, and impose sanctions. This might be interesting to a lot of folks out there. Benefits of imposing sanctions seems high. Costs and risks of imposing sanctions seems high. Likelihood of success, high. But that middle one, costs and risks, How much could this harm the United States and Western allies? Oh, it very much could. It is high risk, and yet we did it anyway. And now we're seeing why it was high risk, because it's fucking boomeranged back. Europe is in shit tons of trouble. Energy is through the roof. People can't afford to heat their houses in places like Germany. And the U.S. is going, well, isn't that interesting? I mean, of course, it's boomeranged against the United States as well, but we don't care, because as long as it's arming Russia, who gives a shit about the American people? And yet again, this proves they don't care about you. They don't fucking care about you and me. This is, at no level do our politicians, our ruling elite, care about us, meaning regular people that are not millionaires, but really multi-millionaires. Like, unless you got $50 million in the bank, they're not even glancing in your direction. They don't care if these sanctions have boomeranged and harm the U.S. economy and harm average people. They don't give a shit. They don't care about us. That seems to be a theme of our system, of our unfettered capitalist profit over all else system. Because you know what Wall Street doesn't measure? How much did you care about the American people? You ever see that on Wall Street? Well, it turns out that Goldman Sachs cared a little more about the average American. No, it's not in the charts. You see all those numbers flashing? Caring about the average American is not in those charts. The let's see, the first three measures. So of that one chart I just showed, the first three measures were implemented when the war in Ukraine was launched. The geopolitical measures included an option of providing lethal aid to Ukraine, which, big surprise, included that cost risk analysis of high risk. And here we are now preparing to send tanks to Ukraine. Other geopolitical measures Rand evaluated included more support for Syrian rebels. Now, hopefully you all understand the entire shitstorm in Syria over the past many years. I'm not going to go through it again, but we've been funding the so-called rebels, many of them being straight up terrorists, many of them beheading innocent people in the streets, some of them being Al-Qaeda offshoots or Al-Qaeda affiliates. So, not even just offshoots. Like, they're still talking. They still get on the phone. They go, hey, Al-Qaeda, how you doing? It's your buddy Al-Nusra. Yeah, you can call me Al for short. Al-Qaeda affiliates, we're funding and arming them because we wanted to turn Syria into a failed state, which we've largely done. Yes, Assad is still in power thanks to his alliance with Russia, but 90% of Syrians are below the poverty line. 90% of Syrians worry about where their energy will come from, whether they'll have the lights on, whether they'll have food. 90%. And we did that. Yay! We have killed God knows how many children and old people and small kids and babies in Syria. We're the good guys. Can you tell? I feel like that should be the end of, like, every time you hear what the U.S. is responsible for with our economic wars, the end of it should be like, can you tell we're the good guys? Just under it, like reports just under it. And at what point do you realize we're not the good guys? Oh, so here's the chart. Oh, well, let me read this first. Other geopolitical measures Rand evaluated included support for Syrian rebels, regime change per color revolution in Belarus, which we did attempt. It didn't get a lot of U.S. coverage, but we tried to create a color revolution. Many of you probably know color revolutions are these kind of faux revolutions. That doesn't mean there's not anyone genuine involved in them, but they're created. Wow, thanks, James. They're created by the U.S. funding, U.S. offshoots, CIA cutouts. And again, this does not mean that every citizen in Belarus didn't have some complaint about their government, as with the protests in Hong Kong, as with the protests in Ukraine, the Maidan coup. It doesn't mean everyone out there is it's not like a CIA agent walks up to each person and gives them $20. It means the impetus, the power, the funding for a lot of it is coming from the US and CIA cutouts. So we tried to do that in Belarus and it failed, but we did attempt it. So yet again, you see the US taking RAND policy initiatives and implementing them. So Color Revolution in Belarus to exploit tensions in the southern Caucasus and to reduce Russian influence in Central Asia. So here's another one of these charts. But at the top, it said provide lethal aid to Ukraine. Again, this is before the war in Ukraine, the proxy war in Ukraine even began. Quick reminder, even former CIA head Leon Panetta calls this a proxy war. It is not a hidden fact that this is a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia. And the U.S. is willing to fight this to the last Ukrainian because we get to watch them die and we don't have to send our troops over to die. We just get to watch innocent, largely innocent. I mean, yes, some non-innocent, but largely innocent Ukrainians die. But here it is. Provide lethal aid to Ukraine. Benefits high. Costs and risks high. Likelihood of success medium. And here we are doing it. Costs and risks high. Yeah, you want to know what the costs and risks being high means? A fucking risk of nuclear disaster. That's what we're pushing to the brink of. That's what we're up on the edge of. That's what we are pushing. You ever see those things at the casino where you, or it doesn't even have to be a casino, it could be an arcade, where you stick a quarter in and the quarter drops down with all these other quarters and there's like a pile of quarters there and you're hoping your quarter will be, and there's a pushing thing, a metal thing pushing. You're hoping your quarter will cause that last little push where all the quarters will fall down and you'll win all that money. You're just hoping your quarter will make the difference. Well, that's what we're doing. We're the pushing arm and we're just fucking pushing towards nuclear disaster. And we just keep dropping quarters in. Let's see if that's the one. Nuclear disaster. Let's see. Put another one in there and just push towards the edge of nuclear catastrophe. But there's a medium chance of success. So we're like, yeah. So our U.S. government is like, yeah, let's fucking do it. The Trump and Biden administration both implemented the measures that seem to have high benefits as well as high risks. Then they say letting the conflict extend longer, the proxy war to extend longer, concludes a newly released RAND report is itself a danger. The U.S. must avoid a long war. Now, I hope that the U.S. listens to that part of this fucking analysis. Much of what RAND recommends the U.S. ruling elite do, because this is why RAND exists, is to come up with these policy analyses. But again, much of what RAND recommends is horrific shit, like lethal aid to Ukraine. But here they are recommending that basically we wrap up the proxy war in Ukraine. And again, this is very revealing of what is happening in Ukraine. If it is up to the United States as to whether to wrap this up, as to whether to end this, as to whether to stop this war in Ukraine, then, boy, that goes against everything we've heard from the mainstream media. The mainstream media and our government will have you believe it's not up to us, right? Yes, we are providing aid to Ukraine, but they were invaded by Russia, and this is just out of our hands. We have nothing to do with it. Yes, once it happened, we gave them a gun and we tried to help, but we can't stop this. All we can do is just try and help Ukraine. That's what we claim. But this report is clearly saying, oh, the U.S. can essentially anytime at once, it may take a few months, but essentially anytime at once end this thing. Now, I know that most of you, because you're watching this, you already knew that, but it's amazing how many people in America don't understand that the U.S. could right now tell Ukraine to sit on a peace talks. The U.S. actually ended peace talks, stopped peace talks. We sent Boris Johnson over there, the fucking prime minister clown back when he was prime minister. We sent him to Zelensky. He met with Zelensky. He met with Zelensky. Sorry, I'm trying to go very fast because there's a lot of shit to get to you. You can use your video controller to slow it down to 0.9 speed if you would like. Thanks you, James, for the compliment. George Carlin would have loved Lee Camp. I never got to meet Carlin, but his daughter Kelly actually did some intros at my shows, and she did say I was one of the few keeping her father's torch lit. So that is one of the highlights of my career. But Anyway, to get back to Ukraine, to get sidetracked, highly sidetracked for a second. To get back to Ukraine, it's clear the U.S. could have stopped this. The U.S. had a chance to stop this back in April when peace talks were about to be concluded, and we sent Boris Johnson at U.S. behest over to Zelensky to say, do not sign a peace deal, and in fact end peace talks, which Zelensky immediately did. Okay, but to continue with this part, the authors argue, in addition to minimizing the risks of major escalation, U.S. interests would be best served by avoiding a protracted conflict. The costs and risks of a long war in Ukraine are significant and outweigh the possible benefits of such a trajectory for the United States. Although Washington cannot by itself determine the war's duration, it can take steps that make an eventual negotiated end to the conflict more likely. Yeah, Rand can't. They can't outwardly say the U.S. could end this anytime they want, but the U.S. could end this anytime they want. Please hold. I have to sip my energy juice. I'm kidding. It's not an energy drink. I guess coffee is an energy drink, isn't it? The study argues that Ukraine's retaking of territory Russia controls should not be relevant for U.S. plans. I love that, because it's like the U.S. government pretends like we're in this for Ukraine. We're trying to help Ukraine. We're trying to save Ukraine. And then this high-level U.S. policy report is saying it doesn't really matter to us whether Ukraine takes the territory that Russia's already taken, like Donbass region or Crimea. We don't actually really care. Because of course we don't. We are just using that as a reason to sanction Russia. We don't actually give a shit about the people. Are you seeing a theme here? Our ruling elite, our ruling cabal, they don't give a shit about you and me, American. You're not all Americans, but many of you are. They don't give a shit about average Americans. They also don't give a flying fuck about average Ukrainians. They don't give a flying fuck about average Russians. They don't give a flying fuck about average Iranians. I'm sorry for all the fucks, but it kind of is needed right now. They don't give a fuck about any average people. Ruling elite only gives a shit about ruling elite. And about those that are richer than any of us could imagine. And I don't know. Maybe this is maybe I'm starting to hint at how all wars are class wars. Isn't that interesting? I didn't even realize that. I guess apparently there's a class structure that is going on in all of these capitalist societies in which the average people are treated like shit, while the rich get richer. The rich in Ukraine are doing great. Yes, there are a few that maybe this fucked up their jam, whatever they had going, whatever scam they had running. But the corrupt and rich in Ukraine are doing awesome. They're doing fine. Even if they had to flee the country, they fled the country with their fucking money. They're doing fine. The rich in Russia are largely doing fine. The incredibly rich in the U.S. are doing fine. This war is not destroying them. It's destroying average people. It's destroying those of us who are not multi-millionaires. And that's what these wars do. That's what all of our wars do. The study argues that Ukraine's retaking of territory Russia controls should not be relevant for U.S. plans. It has little benefits, but high costs. Prolonging the war, while having some benefits for the U.S., has even more risk and costs attached to it. You know who else said this? And it's the only time in my life. It's the only time in my life that I've ever agreed with a man named Henry Kissinger. But fucking 99-year-old Henry Kissinger fucking propped up his rotting sack of flesh that is like inches from hell. He's actually oozing down to hell a piece at a time. It's just a little drip of fleshy blob goes down to hell at a time, and some of him still exists in this plane that you and I can see. Anyway, as Kissinger slowly drips down to hell, he somehow was propped up Weekend at Bernie scenario and said that we need to end this proxy war in Ukraine because it's harmful to the United States. So then there's this long chart from the Rand Corporation showing all of the costs and the explanation for the cost of extending this proxy war in Ukraine. Beyond the potential for Russian gains and the economic consequences for Ukraine, Europe, and the world, a long war would also have consequences for U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. ability to focus on its other priorities, particularly China, will remain constrained as long as the war is absorbing senior policymakers' time and U.S. military resources. Keyword, military resources. Boy, here is one of the largest, most significant policy report groups saying that the U.S. needs to pivot our military resources towards China. So to sum this up in a few simpler words, the Rand Corporation is telling the ruling elite of the U.S. that we should wrap up this proxy war with Ukraine because, largely it's had the effect that we wanted. I mean, yes, many of the sanctions backfired, but as I just explained, they don't give a fuck about you, so it doesn't matter. But so largely it's had the effect we wanted, which is crazy sanctions on Russia. We've bombed their Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We've destroyed their energy partnership with Europe. Europe is now pushed deeper into a vassal state, a vassal group of states, and Russia has been severed from that cooperation economically and otherwise. So those things were successes, quote unquote, for our pro-war regime. And so this report is saying, let's wrap it up because we're not going to get a lot more gain at this point. And let's pivot those military resources toward China, which again is disastrous. It is putting us on the cusp of fucking nuclear war. And I mean, but this shows you what they're thinking. Like you can watch the mainstream media all day long and never actually understand or be told what your ruling elite are really thinking during this shitstorm. And this is how you learn what they're thinking. These types of internal reports that are not really meant for public consumption. The U.S. says Rand can take measures that make a quick end of the war possible. Oh, the U.S. has the ability to end the war in Ukraine. Interesting. I thought it was just happening and we didn't understand why or what was going on. And we just were like, well, let's give them some bombs. I guess they're trying to fight Russia. The U.S. can press Ukraine to start negotiations and to accept a bad outcome by threatening to stop financing the war. It can encourage Russia to enter into negotiations by offering substantial sanctions relief. And this is actually, what I just read you is actually not even telling you the true extent of how the U.S. could end the war in Ukraine, the proxy war in Ukraine. The moment the U.S. says, we are no longer supporting you if you don't sign a peace deal, the moment the U.S. says that, the moment NATO says that, Ukraine does exactly as they're told. That's how it works. And that's actually how they crushed the peace deal back in April. Zelensky went over there. He said, you can sign a peace deal. But if you do, you are losing the entire Western support. U.S., NATO, all of us are no longer supporting you in any way, monetarily or otherwise. And of course, Zelensky was like, oh, all right, well, then I guess we're crushing the peace deal. So that's not to say there's not a lot in this war for Zelensky. He gets to continue to steal millions and millions of dollars. He gets to be a so-called war hero. He gets all that bullshit. A dramatic overnight shift in U.S. policy is potentially impossible, both domestically and with allies, and would be unwise in any case. So I like that line because it says like, although for us internally, we'd be fine with just tomorrow going, hey, we don't support Ukraine anymore. But the problem is then NATO, then all these European countries would go, wait, what? I thought we were told this was a life or death situation. I thought we were told we had to protect the Ukrainians. I thought we were told we had to stop this. And then the U.S. is like, nah, I changed my mind. So that's why they say that. The U.S. can't just spend on a dime because politically it'd be a bad idea. But developing these instruments now and socializing them with Ukraine and with U.S. allies might help catalyze the eventual start of the process that could bring this war to a negotiated end in a time frame that would serve U.S. interests. That's what the ruling elite are doing. Serving U.S. interests. They don't give a fuck about Ukrainians. They don't give a fuck about anyone who lives in NATO countries. Doesn't matter. Just how will it serve U.S. interests? The alternative is a long war that poses major challenge for the United States, Ukraine, and the rest of the world. But they're saying, I mean, it's amazing to see sociopaths write their sociopathic ideas down on paper and be like, hey, here's what I believe. And we're like, wow, you are a sociopath. But they're saying right here that it would look bad, to translate what they just said, it would look bad for the U.S. to stop the war right now. Doesn't matter how many people are dying. Doesn't matter how many people are hit by bombs every day. Doesn't matter innocent people. Doesn't matter all the millions of refugees that have had to flee their country. None of that matters. Doesn't matter the infrastructure destroyed. Doesn't matter how many years Ukraine will spend trying to build back from this. None of that matters. All that matters, it might look bad. Look bad for the U.S. to suddenly go, we're done with the war. So Rand is saying, well, we can't do that. But what we could do is we could start socializing. We could start dropping hints that we're going to wrap this up soon, that we're going to wrap up our proxy war soon. Just fucking incredible. So this level of sociopathy out of these clowns. Oh, they're clowns with blood that they've used to paint the smile on. All right, I spent too long on that topic, so I'm going to wrap up that topic. But I want to get to the next one. I'll tell you what, I'll get it started, and then the next topic about Meet the Press. I'm going to tear apart a Meet the Press clip because you gotta fucking shills. You gotta tear them apart too. And I'll start it on all the platforms, but soon, maybe in 10 minutes or so, we'll be going to onlyrumble.com/Lee Camp. It's already running live there. You can watch it for free. You just head over to rumble.com/Lee Camp and join up there. But I hope you will also support me, and I hope you're getting something out of this, and become a member at leecamp.net. You get all kinds of exclusive stuff. You get a Q&A with me every Friday, where I answer just about every question people pose. So that's every Friday. You can hang out with me. Also, there's community chats. I ask people what to cover. I just threw one up there the other day about what topics they'd like to see covered. So that's all at leecamp.net, which will forward you to my locals page. All right. Let's give a look-see of Tuck Chad. I like calling him Tuck Chad because it makes him sound like the innocent he is. Did I say innocent? I meant imbecile. Sorry, I'm trying to read 7 things. I'm trying to read 7 things at once, which never works well. But all right, so you guys by now know about the Tyree Nichols story. Black man beaten to death in a horrible, horrific manner. Now, people are pointing out it was black police, which that doesn't fucking matter. It's our police system. And there's a great quote by James Baldwin, famous black writer, saying, we understood that if you absolutely have to call the cops in a situation, you should really hope it's not the black cops. And that was a black man, a great writer, kind of, honestly, I'd call him a prophet, the black prophetic class. He said, the black cops are the worst because they're trying to prove to their white superiors, their white colleagues, that they're, part of the system, that they're more racist than the others. But anyway, that's a side note. That's not really getting into what I want to talk about here, but I wanted to remind you of the story that is ongoing. And yet again, whenever I do these things where I play the bullshit coming out of these mainstream media outlets, I always like to preface that I didn't spend hours looking for the right clip to tackle. I spent like 10 minutes, and within that time, you watch one or two clips and you will find one that is just filled with shit that shows what our mainstream media is. And so I just grabbed like the second clip I saw. Actually, it might have been the first one I pulled up, but all right. Let's just take a look at this.
Welcome back, panelists here. NBC News Washington correspondent, Michelle Sinder. She's also moderator of Washington Week. Amna Nawaz is the co-anchor.
I meant to
Stephen Hayes,
skip
editor
all these
of
intros.
Stuck on Qualified Immunity. Because you've been there when they've been trying to do police Haskell. Welcome to all of you. I'm going to start with the lawmaker.
I have it on fast speed, but I'll slow it down a bit.
Because you've been there when they've been trying to do police reform a few times now. The most recent time, I think it didn't happen, stuck on qualified immunity. Should we have any hope that...
You notice he says the most recent time it didn't happen. Yeah, it never happens. It never fucking happens. There is no police reform in this country because here's something else your mainstream media can never tell you. Nothing ever happens through our Congress. Nothing the American people want that doesn't align with corporate interests ever happens through our Congress. And if anyone out there can point to some tiny little thing, it is the exception that proves the rule. And I know I mention it too much, but there's a large Princeton study that shows that looked at 1,779 policy initiatives and found that if the American people want something to happen and it doesn't align with corporate America, it has a near 0% chance of ever happening. So Chuck Todd's acting kind of, and this is what your mainstream media does. They go, they say something like, well, we want police reform, and it hasn't seemed to happen. Why is that? But what they won't tell you is nothing happens. Nothing the American people want happens. Not to mention, of course, you aren't going to see true reform to the fascist system that protects this status quo. It protects those ruling elite in Congress. So, of course, they aren't going to actually reform them. Every once in a while, they'll do a song and dance about how they had some kind of reform. The one that comes to mind is the 1033 program out of the Pentagon, where Obama said, a big push to stop the 1033 program, which allowed Pentagon weapons of war to go to local, municipal, etc. police forces. And so you have police driving around in fucking MRAPs and all that shit. And when it finally happened and Obama did a big thing, I have ended the 1033 program. It turned out it had actually stopped three items from actually getting from the Pentagon to what they claim they stopped was 6 things from getting from the Pentagon to police. But actually 3 of them had already stopped for other reasons. So you're left with 3 things. And I don't remember what all 3 of them are, but I remember one of them was bayonets. Bayonets could no longer be sent from the Pentagon to local police. That was a real problem. God, the bayoneting, it was just a scourge of bayoneting across America by police. God, the number of police running down fucking city blocks with bayonets on the end of their gun. No, it was meaningless. Meaningless. But they run around going, we did it, we reformed the police. Bullshit. But yeah, so that's one sentence. That's my explanation of one sentence from Meet the Press. Let's keep going. And I forgot he mumbled something about qualified immunity, which is the idea that basically cops can do whatever the fuck they want and they're immune to prosecution. And, he mumbles that. It dribbled out of the side of his mouth. Something about qualified immunity. Yeah, qualified immunity is a fascist idea. The cops can do whatever they want and they're immune to prosecution. That's like fascism 101. And yet here he is being like, something about qualified immunity. Anyway, his question was, Do we have any hope there will be police reform now? But of course, they won't reveal to you. No, there won't, because nothing Americans want that doesn't align with corporate interests gets done. They can't say that part.
This time is different.
I'm always optimistic, and I do think.
You notice the stutters. Do we have any hope of police reform? I
think this is brutal, and people who think that body cams on police officers are not doing what they should.
I just want to start out. She says this is brutal, which is this bullshit virtue signaling coming from really both sides. You'll hear Republicans say like, this is wrong. A cop shouldn't do that too. But especially from the Democrats, they say this is just so wrong. Meanwhile, she's a former senator, so she was there and part of this system that allows this brutality to continue. But she's like, this is just, I can't believe it. And that's the other thing. She's saying this is brutal now. It was brutal when she was a senator too. But she, just now. But let's keep listening to what she was just going to say about body cams.
That body cams on police officers are not doing what they should. I get that. This young man died, but we now know exactly what happened. So it does make a difference. So,
yeah, but here's the thing. Does it really make a difference? Okay, first of all, yes, there was a body cam which allowed us to see this footage, but you know how many offenses by police are filmed on body cams and never released in any way to the public? So just because something is filmed doesn't mean the public gets it. In this case, we did. Maybe this is, again, the exception that proves the rule. Maybe there's that rarity where the cops actually fucking did something horrific. It was filmed and it went viral across America. Maybe this is the rarity rather than she's acting like every body cam is live streamed. That's what they should do. Every cop body cam should be live streamed across the internet so we could watch them all of the time. But of course, the other thing is that they've proven, and I get that some areas in the country are better than others. Many areas have different stipulations on these things, but they've proven that largely cops turn off the body cam when they're about to do some really awful shit. They say the body cam malfunctioned. They have the body cam pointing in the wrong direction. They happen to have their hand over the body cam as they fucking poke the guy in the eyes. Whatever the thing. And in some places, it's illegal for them to, they have a law. The police union has successfully gotten a law saying you can't release the body cam footage publicly. So there's so many levels between the public actually seeing the harm our police are doing and what's actually being filmed that it doesn't always work. So here she is touting that, oh, well, body cams have changed everything. No, they haven't. Maybe in this case, they made a difference. But really, most police abuse that we see is with people with goddamn cell phones. That's most of the police abuse we're seeing is citizens filming police, whether the police want them to or not, because that shit gets out. Whether the Jesus Christ, the police, department wants it to be seen or not. So, but this is her job, is to keep everybody in the Overton window and to see the positives of this, right? We're making progress. That's her job. She is a former senator. She's part of the system. She's part of mainstream media. Part of their job is to say, you know what? We are making progress, aren't we? Are we? This was and one of the other people is going to mention this in a moment. This last year was the most people ever killed by police. You can see those body cams have really kept them in check, huh? Really, really got them to think about their behavior, considering police killed more people this past year than they've ever killed in the United States. Sorry. Here we go.
We are to the point that if you do this,
Mhm.
a camera is going to catch it.
Yeah.
And I
not
gotta
show it.
applaud Memphis and that police chief,
Camera's going to catch it and largely not show it to the public.
how quickly they brought this out to
Yeah.
the public and how quickly they charged him with murder.
And then she says, well, and look how quickly they dealt with this. Well, yeah, they dealt with it because it became a national news story. Police killings rarely become a national news story. Oh, by the way, folks, I'm going to just Rumble now, rumble.com/Lee Camp. It's free to head over there. It's free to watch. It's free to comment. Rumble.com/Lee